go live.
Well, while you're doing, am I? Oh yeah, I'm good. While you're doing that, Rod, the British teletype contest is going, and it's really hot on 20 meters. And I'm watching FT8 on 10 meters, and somebody in Ontario just decoded South Korea. I'm not sure how real that is yet, but it looks like we're having some interesting conditions.
Very good. Okay, we'll get started. Good morning, Cycle 25. We are blessed this morning with Dr. Scott Wright with our topic, combining work, travel, and ham radio operating from his experiences in faraway places like Chile and China. So thank you to our recent addition, Scott Wright, and Scott's call is K0MD. You have heard that many times in contests. So I am absolutely delighted to have him here. Scott, you can take it away anytime.
Thanks very much, Rod. Let me go ahead and share the screen and we'll get things launched. Thanks for inviting me to present to this group and talk about this. I've really been quite fortunate in my life to travel a lot with work. And sometime in the late 2000s, I began to try to combine some ham radio activities with it. So this is really a talk about the three areas that I've been able to travel to. So here's my QSL card and some screenshots of pictures on it from the station. Thought I would talk with you this morning about just the background of how I came into ham radio, and then some activities in Chile, a little bit in China, which is still one of the places that few hams have been able to operate, and then finish it with a little bit of excitement in the Caribbean. Let's see here. This is where I grew up. This is in southeastern Kentucky in the Appalachian Mountains, right in the heart of the Daniel Boone National Forest. You look at the building on the right, that was the school I attended from 4th grade through 8th grade. And it was built in the Work Projects Administration. So that was a program put in place during the New Deal to try to get a lot of unemployed Americans back to work. And I pointed the area in the front of the building where there's a library where I discovered a book on ham radio in 7th grade and took it home and had learned the Morse code by the 3rd night. And was asking, and by the 4th night of that week, my dad had found a local ham who could show me a shack, and who happened to be a neighbor. And from then, the rest is history. So here I am at a much younger age. When I was 13, that's my original station, a Heathkit HW101. There's a Dentron Super Tuner, a little Radio Shack SWR meter, a D104 microphone, the matching speaker, and then some ARRL books. What's really interesting about this is my first mentor, or Elmer, strung an inverted V 8040 dipole just above that window. And the coax would come in through the bottom. You could see it going into down the baseboard there. And we've got an encyclopedia holding the window closed. So quite a homemade ham shack. And the first couple of years as a ham, I did a lot of odd and end jobs and yard mowing, so I could buy a tower for $100, a Yagi for some money, a rotator, and that was my enjoyment in ham radio. The brick house in the background is where I grew up. The white partition on the back and those power lines did not exist when I was a teenager. This is my grandmother's house to the right. And so you can imagine a tower that my dad took down when I went to medical school, sold it. So that bedroom is where I had a bedroom and where the ham shack was. This was the backyard. I had an inverted L for 160 that went way back into the woods there. This neighbor didn't mind me. The neighbor in this house didn't mind me running it all the way down into his woods. And that was where it first started. There's the picture of me and the radio. To the right is one of my daughters who's a ham. When she was the same age, she had acquired this old radio back. I'd given it to a friend in Kentucky. And then I called him and said, "Hey, could I buy it back?" I didn't sell it to him. And I said, "Can I buy it back? Because she really wants it." And he said, "No, I'll give it to you." He says, "I haven't been on the air in 10 years either." So there she accumulated it and did that. So I don't know if any of you have seen this cartoon, but I sometimes think that my wife must wonder if this is what got me into ham radio, because if you look at it, the two things that really drew me to amateur radio were the expense and the inconvenience, right? And if you're a contester, it does get expensive. And if you're a spouse to a contester, boy, some of the stuff we bring in can be inconvenient. Like this tower. This is my main operating tower. It's 130 feet. Plus, it sits on top of about a 5-foot rotating device, so a rotating base. And those are monoband Yagis built by Force 12 called C49 XR Yagis. They have 4 elements on 20, 7 on 15, and they have 14 technical elements on 10, but it really acts like a 10 element monobander on 10. So I have 3 of those and I can phase them. Above the top antenna is a 2-element 40-meter Yagi. And then below the middle C49 is another 2-element 40 Yagi. And on the same boom is a 2-element monoband 30 Yagi. And then below that is a work antenna to give you some sense for the size. You can see the 24-foot boom there looks quite short, and it's got 4 elements on 17 and 3 on 12. It was custom designed by Tom Schiller in 6BT. And then the bottom C49. I acquired all these antennas except maybe 140 meter as used. So I've made a good deal here of buying used antennas and refurbishing them. And you can look to the west there and see just how much of an elevated plateau I live on. It's about 190 feet from the ridge or hilltop that we live on down below to the area below. And that would be the path to California and to VE6 straight ahead. And then the antennas are pointed to Europe. Here's an updated picture from the summer. I spent over 150 hours this summer and fall building and installing a 4-square array for 80 meters. You can see the control box in the middle. And then in the distance is some woods, then our home sits behind the woods. And here's a picture of the house on the left. And you can see the 160 vertical, which is a center loaded vertical that performs okay compared to everything else. It underperforms, but that's the problem when you put in really good antennas. Suddenly your better antennas start underperforming. And the antenna on the tower on the left is a series of 2-element monobanders for 10, 15, and 20. It's a C3S version built by JK. It's a updated version of what Tom Schiller put out. And here's where I'm sitting this morning. This is the ham shack. It's not always this neat. The radios are really an ICOM lineup at this point. And the 2 on the left, I run in an SO2R configuration. On the right is an ICOM 7300 that largely travels with me when I go overseas now, but it's set up as its own standalone station. And then to the right of it is an ICOM 705 that I like to get on and use the antennas at home. It really performs exceedingly well when you're on Yagi antennas. So I'm often asked, why operate overseas? And many of us like new experiences. If you live in a northern latitude like I do and all of our VE friends, you can combine a winter vacation with some ham radio fun. You can experience propagation from another location. So if you're a scientist and enjoy propagation like Frank and others, this is a great tool to do it with. It can enhance a business trip. It gives you something to do on your downtime. It gives you something to do with friends and family. When I started going to the Caribbean, I explained to my wife that this was sort of like a deer hunting trip, except I didn't deer hunt. And so 2 or 3 friends and I would go there for a few days, just like typical some of our friends have deer hunting trips in the northern part of the state. If you like to have high rates and have a high score, and contesters sort of enjoy those 2 events or factors, yeah, it gives you a chance to do that. You're much more competitive to win in a world category than you would if you stay in the US, and you can just enjoy and have fun. I like to say, is it difficult as a decision to trade this QTH for a different one for a week in February? Here you can see the temperature was about minus 15 as it was this week. And you can see the beautiful sunsets that we often get in the winter on the bottom right, and the place I work on the top left, and then a place we often go to, or we were going to, the Caribbean, has quite an allure. So I've been going to Chile since 1999 as doing medical conferences and taking medical education to much of the republic there. They've honored me with keys to 2 cities for the groups of people that I've brought, which is far more of an honor than I deserve for just taking a week of time and finding 20 faculty to travel with me. It's a very interesting country. It's a long, narrow country, right? You can go from the Andes Mountains, go 200 miles or less to the west, and you're at the Pacific Ocean. And it's nearly 2,600 miles north to south. So it goes from the central part of South America all the way to the southern tip of South America. And like most major countries, about a third of the people live in the capital. and the rest live among some larger cities, and it's got some rural places. Many of the photos I'm about to show you I've taken. This is in the Atacama Desert, one of the driest places on Earth. Now, the white you see there isn't snow, it's salt, because they just haven't had meaningful rainfall in thousands of years. And here's an example of a body of water with the salt crystals. And you're like, well, that's pretty interesting water, but it's full of arsenic, I'm told. And some of the birds who drink it have adapted to being able to survive with that, but it's been polluted from the copper mining that they have had going on. This is the central part of the country near Santiago, between Valparaiso and Santiago. You think of Chilean wine, and this is how they grow their vineyards. This is in the southern part of the country. You know, most people who go on vacation there want to see Torres de Paine or other beautiful areas. Here's a picture I took from a small town. That's one of the volcanoes. They have a series of active volcanoes in the south of Chile. This is called Volcano Osorno, or Mount Osorno. It's a beautiful Lutheran church there. I thought it was just a picturesque shot when I took this. And then here's a picture of a tour boat. You can go out on this lake in Puerto Varas in the south of Chile. I love that little town. And there I am one time on some free time when I was at the Chilean Society of Cardiology meeting in Puerto Varas with a cap on saying Radio Club of Chile. Well, the amateurs in Chile are not called hams, but they're called radio aficionados. And the country really depends on them because they have a lot of natural disasters, earthquakes, et cetera, volcano eruptions. And in fact, by law, they practice emergency communications one night a week. I think it's Tuesday night. And I thought Vince would find that interesting, that they drill and do exactly what he's been talking about in his interviews and his work. Most of the hams in Chile operate 2 meters and 440. Very few are on HF compared to the number on VHF. I would say 5 to 10% of the radio hobbyists in Chile are DXers and contesters. You may have heard of Charlie Echo 3, Charlie Tango, who's the best known contester, and a rising star there is Matthias, Charlie Echo 2 Lima Radio. And a Canadian friend, Dale Green, left British Columbia and went to Reñaca, Chile, and he has the call sign Charlie Echo 2 Sugar Victor. He's also VE7 Sugar Victor. And what's unfortunate, I think, is that most Chilean radio aficionados do not use Morse code. Now, there are no ham dealers in Chile, just as there really are no retail dealers in most of South America, so they have to import everything. The last time I asked, it was like a 40% duty. So if you buy a 1,000 US ICOM 7300, it's almost 1,500 by the time you get it there. So older equipment, especially the Japanese models of Kenwood, Yaesu, and ICOM are really popular. The new 7300 is becoming popular. To give you some sense, the Kenwood TS990S, Kenwood's really flagship 2-receiver radio. There are only 2 in Chile. One is owned by the president of the Radio Club of Chile and the other by a ham in Viña del Mar. Used radio equipment has a premium resale value in Chile. I know a retired pilot for American Airlines who used to sell his old Alpha amplifiers there for more than he could get in the United States. So he would just take them down and sell them on a layover. The Chilean hams, like a lot of US and Canadian hams, are using older antennas. You know, you put a Yagi up, it'll stay for a long time. They have a lot of Mosley antennas. They have some high gain and Cushcraft tri-banders. Very few will have the modern things like the steppers. Dale, for example, VE7 SV, CE2 SV has a 4-element stepper. They often homebrew their Yagi. So if you ask them what do they have on their workbench, they're likely to tell you they're building a Yagi for outside. And very few of them use amplifiers, which means that their signals are going to sound weaker here than maybe some of their neighbors in Argentina or Brazil, where there seem to be more amplifiers. So I started going into Chile in 1999, and through 2019, and my last trip, I've been there, I say over 38 trips. I counted it up once. I think it's 40 or 41 times. And in 2007, I started inquiring about how I could maybe get a radio license and operate. And it wasn't too hard. The Radio Club of Chile helped me get my first few licenses. And so I packed an ICOM 7000 in my briefcase and put a Force 12 vertical dipole, a Sigma 40 XK that will tune 40 through 10, and took it with me. And here's how I took the antenna. I put it in a golf club case. This is an SKB case. Tom Scholler recommended it, and the airline would let me check it in as luggage. They ultimately started charging me an exorbitant fee, like $250. So the first time they did that, I persuaded a friend to let me leave it in his closet in Chile. So when I go now, I pull it out of his closet and set it up and operate. Here's the first hotel I ever stayed at in Chile. It's a historic hotel. If any of you have been to Viña del Mar, you're aware of this. It's called the Hotel Cap Ducal. It looks like a boat, except it's not really a ship, but it sits out over the Pacific Ocean. You can see the room that I usually requested, which was room 32. And why room 32? Well, room 32 is right here. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but it's the top room in the hotel, and I could put up the vertical dipole. I never figured out how to put a wire under this natural mast they had, but I could put the vertical dipole up here and anchor it down. And these are spectacular views that you get. And this hotel has been in Chile since 1913. And here's a picture of Hotel Cap Ducal I took from the street. And there you can see the vertical dipole. The coax is feeding in there and going right into my hotel room. And then it's got the top and bottom loaded arms or T-bars, and it is fully resonant on any band 40 through 10. I liked it so much, this photograph. I made a QSL card with my Chilean call, and in the right, there's an insert of the first station I took. There's the ICOM 7000, a microham digikeyer that would interface with either a Mac or a PC. There's the microphone that ICOM supplied. The ICOM hat that I'd acquired is covering a Samlex power supply. I'm not sure that was pretty smart, but I just threw it over for some reason. And then my Bose headphones. As the meeting in Chile grew more popular and more faculty from my medical center learned about it, more and more wanted to go. And of course, when more people want to go, they want a nicer hotel. I mean, Hotel Cap Ducal had one internet point. You could go down to the lobby and get on a shared computer. It didn't have a gym. The restaurant was traditional Chilean, so the food was fabulous, but it was small. So eventually we moved up the street, up the beach a little bit, a half a mile, to Hotel Del Mar, which was the first five-star hotel built in Viña del Mar. Each room had in-room Wi-Fi, and it was much more modern. The only challenge with it as a ham was that there was no access to the roof to install your antenna. And I was told that Chile doesn't build roof accesses to hotels. I don't know why, but they just don't. So I inquired at the hotel and asked them how I could get my antenna, and they said, "Oh, we have guys who will do it." So they had 2 or 3 men who worked in engineering or maintenance, and they actually climbed up on the roof, and I showed them from the top area of the hotel how to assemble the vertical dipole. I couldn't speak enough Spanish to communicate. Their English was not great, but by showing them, they understood how to do it. And so I would feed it up in sections, and here he is putting it together up on the top of the hotel. And it used to sit just right over here because I would have it anchored into that little device there because the winds can be pretty intense. So from 2009 to 2016, I had basically a hotel rooftop antenna that would go up when I would come down. And when I would check in each year after the first year, the staff would say, "Did you bring your antenna?" And we have the men ready to assemble it. And, I would give them 20,000 pesos, $40 US. And I eventually learned I was doubling their daily wage by just tipping them to put it up. So it was a win-win for all of us. And in 2009, my oldest daughter was looking for a science fair project at the point. So I said, "Why don't you use some software and predict where propagation from Chile will be, and then come with me to this meeting, and we'll do CQ worldwide, and you can record where I work and then do an observed to expected graph and map and talk about the physics of propagation." So she did, and she made it to the state science fair with that project, and I was quite proud of that. And I still have a goal of DXCC from Chile, but I'm not quite there. The hotel is very popular because it's got a casino in the main lobby, which is to the east of where the hotel rooms are. So it had lots of noise, and that made weak signal sounds difficult to pick out, even with the filtering on the 7000. So I started looking for a new location. Now, if any of you are friends with Dale Green or know Dale Green, VE7SV, a very well-known contester from Canada, he relocated in retirement to Reñaca, Chile, which is a northern suburb of Viña del Mar, and bought the top penthouse condo on this building. And as part of the deal, arranged for his small tower and antennas to be up. And he has a 4-element stepper. He's got a very popular radio, a K3, and he's invited me to operate many times from his QTH. So in 2016, I decided to do CQ Worldwide CW on Friday night from my home station. And then on Sunday, after I had arrived Sunday morning, because as you know, it takes all day to travel to Chile. So I would leave Saturday morning and get there Sunday morning. I did CQ Worldwide from his location. So I was one of the few people to have two distinct QTHs for one contest, and that made a little bit of the write up in the article about the contest. And here's Dale's station. I brought my own Bengali paddle along because he uses a bug, and I'm not really a good CW sender with a bug. And he had an amplifier, so I was able to run some power and work with a lot of people on 10 meters despite the propagation at that time. Eventually, we couldn't get rooms at Hotel Del Mar. It got quite popular, so we decided to relocate to the Hotel Sheraton, which was also built probably in 2015 in north of Cap Ducal and north of Hotel Del Mar. So here's the beach in their summertime, which would be now. I've never operated the radio from this hotel. I can't get permission from corporate to put an antenna up at this hotel. The other hotel allowed it. But I've got some ideas now to take maybe my 705 and a portable antenna and just operate from the beach the next time I'm at that hotel. But one of my physician friends felt bad that I couldn't get hotel permission to operate. So he said, why don't you bring your portable radio to my vacation, my weekend home on the ocean, which is south of Valparaiso. And I said, sure. So he took me out and showed me the new house he was building as a weekend spot. And what a ham radio paradise. It sits almost 200 feet above the Pacific Ocean. There's no noise there. Everything is solar powered or battery generated. And it's really quiet. So there you can get a sense for takeoff to Canada and the US. You can see the drop off. You can see how far away the other houses are. And on a map, you can see where Viña del Mar and Valparaiso are, where the newest location in Tunquén is, and then Dale's QTH is north there in Reñaca. So here's the ICOM 7000. First time I operated from Tunquén. No noise on it. You can see the S meter is pretty quiet. Not many signals at times because the propagation is up and down. Here's the antenna. Takeoff sits right on a cliff abutting the Pacific Ocean, which is how you want to do a vertical or a vertical dipole, right? You want to get it right in the salt water if you can. And my friend has ultimately had his workers build a path down to the ocean that you can walk. But at the time we put this up, there was no path. And so there it is. It's held in by bungee cords. It's supposed to be self-standing, but with the winds, I had to hold it. It's a great location, except when this happens. So I had to come up with a plan to keep it anchored, and we did. So here's the view. That's the view to Europe and North America and to Japan. It's an unabutted takeoff to all three spots globally. And if you're there at the right or proper times of day, you can work any of those. And the best times to work Europe and North America are in the afternoon, evening, as the terminator line moves from east to west, and propagation is really enhanced along that. And my friend would just be amazed. I would say, well, here's some Russian people I'm talking to, and then here's some Swedish people and Germans, and then these are people in the maritime provinces of Canada, and then eventually by 9:30 at night, it's over to the west coast of the United States. He always made sure I had plenty to drink and plenty to eat, and we had lovely conversations. Usually it was just he and I at his place, and he wanted to make sure I had a good time with the radio. And so this was the views you can see. I mean, it's hard to stay on the air with views like this. Maybe our friends in California are used to this every day, but those of us who are landlocked are not. And these are just some beautiful views. You can see the antenna here. And this is why he bought the property and the house and had it built there. In 2018, I decided that it was time to upgrade the 7000. So I sold it, bought an ICOM 7300 at Dayton, took it down. The Samlex power supply I have still works very well. I like it because you can switch between 220 and 110 very easily. So I do that. The 7300 is a much better receiver than the 7000. And I have a Bengali Traveler Light that I bought specifically for portable overseas operations. It's much more durable and much more robust in terms of being bounced around in luggage. So I haven't been to Chile since post-COVID, since COVID started. I missed a trip to Easter Island that I'd organized in October of 2019. But unfortunately, at the last minute, I had to not go and sent 12 colleagues from work instead. And so I missed my chance to operate from Easter Island. Don't know if we'll ever get back there with that meeting. But anyway, hopefully be back in Chile this fall. In 2007, I was invited to speak at a special conference on healthcare in China near Beijing by the actual People's Republic government. So a group of us went from Rochester in Arizona to Beijing. And I had asked if I could get a radio license and work with the contest team out of Beijing, B1Z. And they agreed, and here I am operating at the B1Z station. You can see they don't have a fancy contest facility, but it's really nice. And it's very ham radio focused. You have the radio to the right, the amplifier to the left, and then the computer in the middle. And it just shows how little adjustments on the radio you need if you're just going to sit there and run as you do as a multi contest station. And here's an example of some of their equipment that they have. So as I said, I was attending a conference, and the government of China was able to help me get a license. And then they actually requested, and someone from the B1Z club stepped up to host me, which was required at this time. So can you just show up and operate in China? And the answer is no, not at all. Everything is pre-planned. So my host turned out to be a really famous IBM engineer, a BA1RB, Fan Bin, who speaks perfect English and perfect Mandarin, and I don't know how many other languages. He travels back and forth to the US a bit with IBM. He had been to Rochester years before, and so we had not known each other. And he had just gotten back from the BS-7H, or Scarborough Reef De-Expedition, when I arrived. And he told me, he said, this will work if we get back from Scarborough, but we don't know exactly when we're getting back. And this is, of course, why they didn't know, because they had built these portable operating desks on the rock there, and they operated in the elements with ICOM 7000s and small amplifiers and vertical antennas, and they activated this very rare and entity for the only time it had been activated in a long time. And in fact, I didn't even work them. My amplifier was broken in 2007 at home, so I thought I had them in the log, but didn't. But anyway, to get a license there, you have to submit a lot of documents, and eventually it was approved, and I was able to go on a Saturday, starting on a Saturday morning, to work with them. And I was giving a talk on late Sunday, so the deal was that I had to leave by Sunday morning. And the conference host provided a translator to come with me, a medical student. And then they also arranged a car and driver. So we left on Saturday at 5 a.m. And we were told that when we got within distance of the facility, we should call Fan Bin, and he would tell us how to find the ham station. And it was a 2-hour drive at 5 a.m. And we got there, and I noticed the driver was driving around, and I said to my translator, the med student, I said, can you ask him what's wrong? And he said, yeah. He says he can't find the location. And he's been told to just look for the big antennas on the hill. So it'd be like looking for K3LR, right, from the interstate, or W0 AIH. And here was, eventually I saw this antenna. And I said, oh, there it is. So he found a little road, and we drove up. And here you can see the path, and to the left is the road. And here you can see some of the antennas. They have a beautiful spot, probably 80 kilometers or so outside of Beijing. And this facility is owned by the radio club, on land owned by a club member. And she has a restaurant at the bottom of the mountain. And the rigs are all provided by club members. They bring them in for the contest, and the antennas stay there. So how do you know you've arrived at the contest location? Well, the antennas make it easy to spot. And there are multiple cars parked there, like with a US or North American ham fest. Everyone has their own customized license plate. I found Fan Bin's car, BA1RB. And I found club members outside working on antennas there. So we were there by 7 a.m. It was daylight, and they were out assembling antennas to fix something that had a problematic SWR. So regardless of cultural and ethnic and language differences, ham operators are the same the world around. We always are fixing antennas and improving our station. So they were expecting me and welcoming me. I had to sign into a club registration book. They took photographs of my license, my passport. They posted that because they said a government inspector would come and make sure that they had done it properly. And I'd been given a brief tour of the contest club, and they wanted to give me every chance to work North America. And it was a CW contest, but they wanted me to be able to work people I might know. And so they let me work the 20-meter station. And here I am, 15 or so years ago. This is Fan Bin, and there I have my conference ID tag on. And these are the radios they had: a Yaesu FT990, an ICOM 736, a Kenwood 940, and a Japan Radio Corporation HF rig, and multiple tube type amplifiers that were US based. So as you can see, there's no subsidy for ham radio in the PRC. They had to buy and pay for all their own equipment, and they took good care of their used equipment. Their antennas were really amazing. They had a 3-element 40-meter Yagi, and a 4-element 20-meter Yagi bought from Force 12. And I asked the owner of Force 12 when I got back if he had sent them there, and he said no, but he suspected they might end up there because he'd sold them to someone else in Asia. They had a 160-meter vertical monopole, which made their 160 signal pretty loud. And they had monobanders on 10 and 15, and then some 80-meter verticals. And I'll show you some pictures. Here's the 160 antenna. It's a tower that then has a steel mast that goes up, or aluminum mast, I don't know which, and it's top loaded. And then you can see the matching network along the side they use to tune it. You can see the tower with the 40-meter antenna to the left and the 20-meter antenna, I think, above it. There's a zoomed in picture of those. And then you can get a sense for a little tri-bander they put up as a multiplier antenna, and there's another antenna they use there. So they really had thought through this station well, and I had a great time. At lunchtime, they came and stopped me from operating and said, no, we have a luncheon in your honor. So the entire club stopped operating for an hour and a half, and we had a wonderful lunch in the restaurant owned by one of the club members at the bottom of the mountain. And these are all long-term radio enthusiasts and ham operators from China. They were very friendly and nice. Some of them spoke English, many of them did not, but they went through the translator, and they were as generous and as hospitable as any place I've been in the world. And they wanted a picture made of us all, so here we are. And I believe the restaurant is owned by her, as I recall. Here's Fan Bin, and this gentleman here had been active on BS7H also, and assured me that the next time they went back, and they were planning at that point to go back, he would hear my call sign among the pileups because he knew I needed it. And here we are with the B1Z flag, and they gave me an honorary membership in their club and invited me to come back and operate anytime. I've sort of entitled this, I'd never been a ham celebrity before, because many of them had never met someone from the US, so they were taking a lot of photographs of me, and they were asking a lot of questions, and the food was just really good, so it hit the spot. We did very well in the contest. We placed number 1 in China, number 2 in Asia, and number 13 worldwide, with just a small score of over 800,000 points. This was 2007, as I said, so propagation was pretty tough at that point. So finally, I'm going to close here by talking about ham radio from paradise, contesting from the Caribbean. And I realize this animation looks more like the northern desert of Chile than anywhere. But for several years, I went and contested from the Turks and Caicos Islands in Providenciales. And this was the view from the original ham station that we used in Provo, overlooking Turtle Cove and just the beautiful Caribbean. First time I went to Turks and Caicos, I almost called home and said to my wife to put the house on the market and move because I wasn't coming home. It was just so beautiful and such a cold, miserable winter like it's been this year. But the place we rented was the Hamlet, rented by Jody Millspa, VP5JM. Later, and one of the hurricanes destroyed her antenna, so she never opened it back up. But we operated there until she closed it. And it's a pretty basic little house that she rents to people, 1 bedroom and 2 other rooms to operate. She's got nice antennas. This was a 10-meter monobander. She put the American flag up above it because she was the American consulate or warden for that island, not the ambassador, but the warden. I said, what does a warden do? Do you arrest people? She said, no. If you lose your passport while you're here, I help you get back to the United States with documents. I said, oh, very good. So here's kind of what her deck overlooks. Here you can see the antennas. There's the 10-meter antenna. There was a 6-meter antenna on top of the Hamlet. And I don't know that I have, yeah, here's the tri-bander we used, and then a 2-element 40-meter Yagi above, equivalent of a C3, except this was called an XR5, and it covered 10 through 20, including the work bands. So we were very popular. Outside of the contest, we were on the work bands and have huge pileups. You said to call CQ a couple of times, and suddenly you had 50 to 1,000 people calling you. And right before the contest, I was on working 15, checking out propagation. And the Japanese came on, and they're the most polite operators, except when they need VP5. And the contest started, and the contest was the ARRL DX contest, which meant that DX works the US, US works DX, but DX does not work DX. And the Japanese wouldn't stop. So I had to QSY so I could start the contest and work the US. Here's the typical station. I brought all of this in Pelican cases. There's an ICOM 7600 here, a micro keyer device here. This is an ACOM 1010 amplifier I eventually bought to take down. This was an Array Solution 6 antenna switch. We got tired of disconnecting coaxes in the middle of the contest. So I would take an automatic antenna switch. You could just turn it. It made the contesting much easier. And this was one of our happier times contesting there. Here you can see the schedule. Put everybody on typically 1 hour shifts during daylight because the numbers of contacts you make per hour are so high that your error rate goes up after the first hour. So everyone was fresh. And here were the amp settings. It was a manual tune amp. So each band of the 6 contest bands, and it would show people where to tune it and how to tune it, And I've often asked, when I've talked to clubs about this, ever wonder what a DX pileup sounds like from the other end, not the US, but the other end. And most people have never operated. So let me play a little bit of this for you. I'm going to start it and then jump it forward to the middle. Here we go. Let's go into here and you can just listen to it.
Roger, VP5 Hotel. W1KT 59K. Roger, VP5 Hotel. The Whiskey November. November 8 Delta Whiskey November 59K. Roger for Oscar Hotel. Victor Papa 5 Hotel. Oscar Yankee Mike full call. Whiskey 2 Alpha Yankee Mike 59K. VP5 Hotel. Zulu 5, please. Okay, Quebec Echo, please.
Okay, as you can hear from that, it's really hard to pick out the call signs. And the audio is probably not as good as the what we heard through the headphones, but sometimes you're just guessing. And what I learned is from being down there is if you can't hear who's calling you, if you say the Whiskey 4, the Victor Echo, or the Whiskey 6, there's always someone there from those places. And usually the zeros would come through because we wanted to work people back home because they wanted to work us. But there's just an art to it. And one of the things I enjoyed the most about the sideband contesting from there is you hear the differences in the dialects of English spoken between the different regions of the United States. And I just enjoyed the different accents, the different dialects, and how the different places contested. If you wanted to be in and out of a pileup immediately, you work a Whiskey 6 because they'd say 5-9 cal. It was so simple. And the loudest stations were always the Victor Echo stations because they had nothing but ocean to propagate between Ontario or Quebec or wherever, especially the VE1 through VE3 stations and the VP5 areas. The Whiskey ones were very loud as well, those in New England, because it was just all ocean propagation. And the Whiskey 4s, many of them were loud. They were always polite, but sometimes they'd want to stop and talk. And during a contest, you don't really have time to have a conversation. So remember one guy got mad at me and he said, "Where is VP5? And, I gave you my QTH. Why don't you give me your?" I was trying to work another station. Finally, I said, "It's in the Turks and Caicos Islands." And, but I guess he didn't have access to QRZ and be able to look it up like that. So it's interesting. And you learn a lot about America and you gain a lot of appreciation for the different dialects. And while I'm not an academic linguist, that was just an enjoyable thing. Let's see. Let's get off this slide now. How do I do this? There we are. Well, I'll finish with this and say, where will my next adventure be? I don't know. We're hoping the world opens back up for travel. I hope to do some travel this year with work, but we'll see. It's just not been optimal, and all the medical meetings have been virtual. And I've enjoyed doing some work in Florida and Arizona for my employer. I do that about 2 weeks every 8 weeks. I'm in one of those two states for a few days. And so in Florida, I take along the little 705, as you can see to my left. And then there's a picture from Jacksonville Beach out the hotel window doing one of the CW Ops Wednesday CWT events, which is about all I can do from there because running 5 watts and, a buddy pole from the hotel balcony isn't the greatest thing. And you can see I have a little Bengali key that goes with the 705. So I guess you can tell I'm a Bengali paddle collector since I have so many in the shack. But I'm going to stop here and be happy to take any questions or feedbacks. But that's been my fun experience of sort of combining ham radio activities while doing some business travel.
Thank you, Scott. I'm going to jump in as the first question and saying, do you find when you're traveling, you've got suitcases full of stuff. We're dealing with probably things that confuse people. How do you go about explaining, why you have about 20 pounds of aluminum with you in a golf case?
That's a great question. The golf case went multiple times, and I would be asked by the airline, is it golf clubs? And I would say, no, it's another sporting event. What is it? And I said, radio sport. So I'd open it up and they would look at it and they would say, okay. And then almost every time I would get into the foreign country and open it up, and there would be a little note from TSA, we have inspected your thing. And I always put a letter in there. And the letter said, to whom it may concern, this is a amateur radio, HF antenna. It's part of a federally licensed radio station. Here's a copy of my license. Here's a copy of the license for the country I'm visiting. Here's my cell number. I can answer it anywhere in the world. If you have questions, feel free to call me. And I never had any trouble with that. I've had TSA in the US stop and pull out a paddle and say, what is this? I say, it's the device to send Morse code. Oh, okay. And I would say, why did you pull it out? Well, it's got a lead bottom in it, so we couldn't scan it. So I quickly realized that I wasn't taking the bench or paddle anymore. It created, stress for TSA, and I didn't want that. And most of the Bengalis go right through without any difficulty. Of late, in the last few years, when I travel, Rod, with the 705 or the 7300, I have had fewer experiences like that. They seem to understand this, and they just pass it through and they look at it and it looks okay. And for the bigger radios like the 7300, I put it in a Pelican case. And I want it to be very well protected, because if it's broken when you arrive, it does you no good, and it's just a disaster. You cannot get it repaired. And then I put the Pelican case inside a piece of luggage so that it's got some protection. I think it's a theft deterrent maneuver, And the Pelican case has locks on it, and they're TSA approved locks, so TSA can open it, but not anybody else can without wire cutters. So that's kind of how I do it. But they're generally friendly and they're curious. And, the biggest challenge is coming back through customs, because they want to make sure you didn't buy it overseas. So I've learned to go down to the customs office in Rochester and get a form 4457 filled out, have the serial number of the radio, serial number of the amplifier, serial number of the micro ham device, serial number of the paddle. And once in Miami, they wanted to keep my forms. And I said, well, my senior agent in Minnesota told me you're not allowed to keep the forms. And the guy said, yes, we are. And I said, do you have a supervisor? So the supervisor came out and said, you're right, we can't keep the forms, so can we make photocopies? Sure, you can make photocopies. So eventually I quit flying through Miami because it's just such a hassle. They told me you're always going to get searched in Miami because they're looking for people with drugs coming out of anywhere in Latin America. So now I connect through Atlanta or Charlotte or somewhere else just to avoid the experience at Miami, where I like to jokingly say due process doesn't seem to exist if you come through customs.
Nice. Any other questions?
Yeah, Scott, I'd like to ask a question. Firstly, greetings, and thank you very much indeed for coming on. One question I would like to ask of you. You've obviously been on the receiving end of stations calling on a pile-up. Knowing and what you've been through in that respect, how would you then, if you were calling into a pile-up, how would you do it? Would you just use the beginning of your call sign, or just do as normal and give your call sign out, or is there any specific way that would help you to get through?
Paul, thank you. What a great set of questions. A couple of tips that I've learned is go a little bit off frequency, 50 hertz, 100 hertz up or down with CW. And remember that almost everyone calls immediately when you say QRZ. And so if you can pause for just a half a second to a second, that immediate roar goes up and then your signal will be heard. The other thing I will tell you is that if you have really good audio for sideband, you do much better. Some of our stations, when we did CQ Worldwide from Italy, had such distorted audio, I couldn't understand them. And native English speakers, whether it's in the US, Canada, or in Great Britain, are much easier to understand, and they typically get through. Anyone who's learned English speaking it with the American accent has an advantage working me, and probably a British accent working some of your colleagues who go overseas and do this sort of thing. But just pausing a little bit, and sometimes not tail ending, but just making sure that the initial noise is over before you call. What I will tell you is that when I hear a signal, and it may sound really weak, and I'll say, the Golf 4 Delta Papa station, and you might be an S2 with the noise of the pileup. And then when you come back without any other noise, you're now an S7 or an S8. And so whatever's happening, your signal gets stronger. The other thing I will say is that hams are courteous. While they fight like mad to get to work you, when you say the Golf 4 Papa station, everyone else just settles down. Generally, everyone else settles down, and then you can hear them. So yeah, calling a little off frequency, calling a little later, a little earlier, and just being timing. Timing is everything, honestly.
Gotcha. So what you're saying, you'd stay on frequency, but if I just go slightly off frequencies and then, and then call and that and do it that way, and then listen back on the original frequency.
That's
and
correct.
as you say, just let the calling die down and then come in.
Yes, because EW sounds like teletype when 50 people call you right on 0 beat. But if you're a little bit off and you're higher pitched or lower pitched, I can hear you. Whereas everybody else sounds like a teletype signal.
I've got a few more questions I'd like to ask you, but we can discuss that. Can I send you an email? Is that all right? And ask for later on. Thank you. And thank you very much indeed. It's been great. Thank you.
So Scott, related to Paul's question, what about, so this is a religious debate, and I'll recognize that going right into it. What about non-standard phonetics in phone as a differentiator?
Vince, everyone says don't do it, but if they're reasonable, yes. But you have to understand who's on the receiving end, right? So if you use Yokohama for Y for me, I may not understand it. And when I talk to Chilean stations from my home, and I'll tell them that my name is Scott, that's Santiago, Concepcion, Osorno, Temuco, they immediately understand what I'm saying because those are 5 towns or 4 towns in Chile. And instead of saying Sierra, Charlie, Oscar, Tango, Tango. So yeah, I think non-standard phonetics do help a bit. I know Frank Donovan would disagree, and that's perfectly okay. But sometimes I will say, "Give me your call again, please. I'm not understanding the second letter," and they'll change it to Texas or Yankee or zebra or instead of Zulu, and then you can hear it because many of them do sound similar, especially with ham radio stuff. It's not high fidelity audio, right? It's single sideband. It's compressed. There's noise, and we're using headphones. Even expensive headphones, the audio still doesn't sound pristine like it will in the stereo.
Yeah, real good. Hey, in the photo of your shack, I think it was around slide 12, there was a console-like device sitting on the surface of your desk with a couple of red buttons on it. It was a slant front console. What was that widget?
Let me just bring my slides back up.
It was around 12, somewhere in the range of 10 to 15 anyway.
Okay, let's do this. Let's go back and find that because there are a number of peripherals. And here we go. And let's just hit this. So describe to me which one you're asking.
Left-hand side of the desk, almost at the left-hand shot. It was a panorama shot, so it was photographically stretched and distorted a little bit. Slant front device, probably about 12 inches wide, 15 inches deep.
Okay. Can you see my slideshow, Vince?
No, sir.
Okay.
We saw it very briefly.
Oh, darn. I wonder what happened. Is it not sharing? Let's see.
I don't think it's sharing right now.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I was sharing it. My apologies. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Let's get back to this. Here.
There we go. That's good.
We're seeing it. Okay, Vince.
On the left, on the desk surface, directly in front of what appears to be an antenna tuner. Yes, sir.
This thing, that is the control head for an ACOM 2000A amplifier. And so there's one here, and there should be one here. But for whatever reason, I don't have the second amplifier control head. It must be sitting erect here. They usually put it right on top of this little device here. So I'll give you a little tour here. This is the Foursquare controller. It's a DX Engineering Foursquare controller. Here is the, it's called a Shackmaster 8. It reads the frequency of the ICOM radio, so it controls the bandpass filter sitting below here that you cannot see. There's an identical bandpass filter here. And then this is the antenna switch. So for this radio, whichever of the antennas I need to use, it's automatically selected. For this radio, I do it manually. And this is a microham device that allows you to use the keyboard to transmit with either radio, receive on both, and then toggle between them for contesting within 1 mm. These are the rotator control boxes. This is a box that controls between 3 transceivers, between this transceiver, and this transceiver. So any of these 3 can go to a single amplifier and to the B port of the antenna switch. This is the stack match that gives me 12 options for how to phase my Yakis. 1 in phase, 2 out of phase, blah, blah, blah. And so that's and this is the second VFO knob for the ICOM 7610. It's called an RC28. This radio has 2 identical receivers, but it doesn't have a second VFO, and NEDXer often works split. So I want to be able to manually tune each VFO. So I made the ICOM RC28 with that.
Very nice. Cool. Thank you very much. A fascinating discussion. The tip to bury your pelicans inside of standard luggage is now emblazoned in my brain too.
Oh, wonderful.
Very good. Okay, well, I'm going to bring our recording to an end. We will have a little bit of time with Scott afterwards, but thank you so much, Scott. You are an amazing addition to our little tribe. I loved the presentation. It's very, very applicable to where we've been, the chats we've been having for the last little while. So with that, thank you, folks. We will continue to do YouTube recordings. Please look for us at www.cycle25.ca or on YouTube at youtube.com